How could a family leave someone behind, like a suitcase forgotten in a crowd? My name is Elena Foster, but most just call me Elena, the quiet daughter who always did what was expected. I grew up in a 2-story house in Omaha, Nebraska, with white shutters and a lawn so perfect it looked painted. My father, Dr. Leonard Foster, was a cardiologist whose crisp shirts and clipped words commanded silence. My mother, Patricia, orchestrated fundraisers and baked for school galas, reminding me constantly that presentation was everything. I was their firstborn, straight-A student, piano ribbons pinned above my bed like trophies, hands always folded too tightly in photos, bracing for something I couldn't name. Love in our house wasn't spoken, it was earned through achievement, measured in how well you vanished into their script. But that day in the airport lounge, waiting for a flight to South Africa, I saw my parents walk away from Grandpa William. His frail frame slouched in a chair, clutching a photo of Grandma. They said they'd be right back, but the minutes stretched. 10, 20, 30, and I knew they weren't coming. The air buzzed with fluorescent hums, the smell of coffee and jet fuel sharp in my nose, and something inside me cracked open, raw and irreversible. I was 19, home from my first year of college when this trip was announced, a family memory before Grandpa's Alzheimer's worsened. I wanted to believe Dad's wide smile, Mom's careful nod, but a whisper in my gut said no one makes memories by abandoning someone. Grandpa was the only one who ever saw me, who told me, "You don't need to earn love, Elena, just be." As a child, he'd take me to the park every Sunday while my parents networked at their social club. We'd feed ducks, read The Wind in the Willows under an elm tree, his scarred hands steady as he turned pages. He called me Land Nanny, a name no one else dared use. Those moments were my shelter, a place where I didn't have to perform. But as his memory faded, those Sundays stopped. Dad said he was slowing down, Mom spoke of him like he was already gone, and they moved him to the guest room, out of sight. I'd sneak up there during high school, especially when finals crushed me with expectations. Grandpa never asked about grades. "Tell me something beautiful you saw today," he'd say. And I always had an answer, a sparrow's wing, a cloud shaped like a boat. His Alzheimer's crept in slowly at first, small things like calling me Laney 3 times in a row, as if surprised I was still there. Then he'd get lost in old stories, repeating lines like they were new. I didn't mind, but Dad's sighs grew sharp, Mom's voice turned cold. To them, he was a problem to manage, not a person. Yet to me, he was still Grandpa, the man who taught me to see more than weather in the sky. When Dad proposed the South Africa trip, I clung to the idea of one last adventure together, even as doubt gnawed at me. The morning we left, the sky bled orange, the air thick with dew and gasoline. Grandpa wore his navy cardigan, his travel sweater, buttoned wrong, sleeves too long, clutching Grandma's photo. In the car, I whispered, "Are you excited, Grandpa?" He hummed an old tune, maybe a lullaby, maybe something from his army days, and didn't answer. I squeezed his hand, his skin papery but warm. At the airport, the chaos of rolling suitcases and boarding calls swallowed us. Mom pulled me aside. "Elena, get us coffee, something strong." I hesitated, glancing at Grandpa, but she waved me off. "He's fine." Dad led him to a quiet corner by a frosted window overlooking the tarmac, sat him down and said, "Just sit here, we'll check in and come right back." His voice was too calm, too deliberate. I stood frozen, coffee order stuck in my throat, watching them walk toward the gates without looking back. 5 minutes passed. 10. Grandpa sat still, tracing the photo frame with his thumb. My heart started to pound. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I walked to the check-in kiosk, legs heavy, and asked about the Foster party. The woman typed, nodded. "All checked in and cleared, boarding soon." My breath caught. All of them. They'd planned this, packed their bags, and left him behind like an afterthought. 100 feet away, Grandpa waited, loyal and lost, while betrayal settled in my chest, quiet as a stone sinking into a well. I started walking, then running, pushing through the crowds of travelers with their rolling bags and hurried steps. My throat tightened, the fluorescent lights blurring as tears stung my eyes. I had always believed betrayal would be loud, slamming doors, raised voices, but it was silent, a calm departure while the world kept spinning. Grandpa was still there when I reached him, shoulders hunched, eyes scanning the terminal like a lost child. I dropped to my knees in front of him, gasping, "Grandpa, it's me, it's Elena." His gaze flickered, confusion clouding his features before a whisper escaped. "Rose?" It was okay. He called me that when fear crept in, mixing me with his late sister. I held his cold hands, whispering, "I'm here. You're not alone." He gripped back, trembling, and asked where my father had gone. If he was supposed to wait forever. "No," I told him. "You're supposed to stay with me. That's all that matters now." In that moment, as strangers streamed past us like rivers around a stone, memories flooded me. The kind Grandpa had always preserved, even when his mind began to unravel. Before the forgetting set in, he was the keeper of what truly counted. He remembered I hated chocolate milk but adored strawberry, how I hummed tunelessly when nervous, and that my middle name was May, after his mother, not Mom's, no matter how she spun it. Even as Alzheimer's chipped away at time and place, he looked at me like I was home. The first slip I noticed was when I was 16. I found him in the driveway in February snow, slippers on his feet, clutching a watering can. He thought he was in Alabama, tending roses with Grandma before she passed. I took his hand gently, led him inside, and when he blinked at me, asking if he was dreaming, I smiled through the ache. "No, Grandpa, you're just remembering." My parents dismissed it as a quirk, whispering about facilities and nursing homes in the kitchen late at night. But I couldn't imagine him among strangers who wouldn't know he hummed jazz when anxious or stirred tea exactly 3 times before sipping. So I stepped in, sitting with him evenings, reading from the books he'd once shared with me. The Secret Garden, Charlotte's Web. He didn't always follow the plots, but his eyes would light up sometimes, like unlocking a forgotten door. Those sparks kept me going, rare as they were. One summer afternoon, right after high school graduation, I skipped my parents' champagne party to sit with him under the backyard maple. His eyes were clearer that day than in weeks, and he said, "Lainey, when they stop seeing me, promise you won't." I froze, then promised fiercely. He nodded, hand over mine. "Then when the time comes, you'll know what to do." Those words embedded in me like a seed, waiting to sprout. But back then, home felt rearranged after college started. The guest room was locked during days for safety, the hallway too quiet, Grandpa no longer at dinner. They acted like he was already a memory, fading like sun-bleached photos. I fought it in small ways. Notes on his nightstand, lemon cookies snuck from the bakery near campus, long sits even if he called me Rose. What stung wasn't his lapses, it was theirs, erasing him bit by bit. One afternoon, I overheard Dad on the phone. "Yes, the lawyer said she'll need to co-sign, but she's just a kid. We'll handle it." Peeking at the papers later, I saw medical directives, estate plans. They weren't preparing for his end. They were shifting everything away from him, and me too. That night, I confronted them, voice tight. He still knows me, smiles when I read, laughs at burnt toast. He's here. Mom folded laundry without looking up. "Elena, you're too emotional. Always too attached." Dad sighed. "Love isn't enough. We're being responsible." "Responsible?" I snapped. "Convenient, you mean." Silence followed, then exclusion from all talks about his care. They cleared his books, tossed his slippers, called it minimalism. Then the trip announcement at dinner, South Africa, a last family memory. Dad's smile too broad, eyes guarded. I glanced at Grandpa, fingers tapping invisibly. Whispering if he wanted adventure, he winked, small but real. So I agreed, not trusting them, but needing to watch. As we stood now in the airport, his hand in mine, I pulled him up gently. "Come on, Grandpa, we're leaving." He hesitated, glancing toward the gates. "Aren't we going on a trip?" "Yes," I said, wrapping my scarf around him, "but not theirs." Mom's voice cut through then. "Elena," heels clacking, mascara smudged. Dad behind, stiff. "Get back here." I held Grandpa tighter. "He doesn't know where he is. You left him like luggage." Mom snapped. "He needs professional care. You don't know what you're doing." "I do," I said. "I'm not abandoning him." Dad hissed. "You're making a scene. Think how this looks." I laughed bitterly. "He's your father." We stood frozen, terminal noise pressing in. Then I stated it plainly. "You left him." No shout, no tears, just truth. Their lips parted, wordless. "We're done," I said, turning away. We walked out of the terminal into the biting morning light. My coat draped over both of us like a makeshift shield against the wind whipping across the parking lot. Grandpa's steps were shuffling, uncertain, his grip on my arm tight as if I were the only anchor in a drifting sea. I hailed the first cab I saw, its yellow paint chipped and faded, engine idling with a low rumble that matched the thudding in my chest. The driver glanced at us in the rearview mirror, eyebrows raised at our lack of luggage, but he didn't ask questions when I gave him the address of the nearest bus station. As we pulled away, the airport shrank in the distance, a concrete behemoth fading like a nightmare I hoped to outrun. Grandpa leaned his head against the window, humming faintly, his breath fogging the glass in small, rhythmic clouds. I watched him, this man who'd once been so solid, now fragile as autumn leaves, and the weight of what we'd escaped settled over me. But in that silence, my mind wandered back to when the fog first started claiming him. Those early days when forgetting was just a whisper, not a storm. It began subtly, the way erosion carves a riverbed over time. Grandpa had always been sharp, a high school shop teacher with hands that could fix anything. A broken toy, a leaky faucet, even a child's scraped knee with a story to distract from the pain. But around my 14th birthday, I noticed the shifts. He'd repeat questions, like asking twice in one conversation what day it was, or he'd pause mid-sentence, eyes distant, as if chasing a thought that slipped away. At first, we laughed it off. Mom called it senior moments. Dad prescribed more rest. But I saw the fear flicker in Grandpa's eyes, brief as a shadow. One evening, after dinner, he stood in the kitchen staring at the fridge, hand on the handle, unable to recall what he'd come for. "Laney," he said softly, turning to me with a sheepish smile. What was I doing? I helped him remember the milk for his tea, but inside a knot formed. This wasn't just age, it was something stealing him piece by piece. As the symptoms deepened, I became his secret guardian. My parents' annoyance grew like weeds. Dad would snap when Grandpa called him by his brother's name from childhood. Mom would sigh dramatically and speak of him in past tense right in front of him, as if he couldn't hear. He was such a vibrant man, she'd say to guests, while he sat quietly in the corner, fingers twisting a napkin. But I refused to let him vanish. I'd sneak upstairs after homework, knock softly on the guest room door, and slip inside with a book or a puzzle. We'd sit by the window, sunlight filtering through the curtains in golden slants, and I'd read aloud. The Wind in the Willows was his favorite still, the adventures of Mole and Ratty bringing a spark to his eyes. Sometimes he'd interrupt with a memory of his own, building model boats as a boy, or fishing with his father on a lazy river, and I'd listen, committing every word to heart. Those visits were my rebellion, quiet but fierce, against the family's dismissal. One night when a storm rattled the windows, he woke confused, thinking it was World War II again, the thunder like distant bombs. I calmed him with stories of our park days, feeding ducks until he drifted back to sleep, my hand in his. The cab jostled over a pothole, pulling me from the reverie. Grandpa stirred, looking at me with momentary clarity. "Where are we going, Rose?" he asked, voice thin but steady. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Somewhere safe, Grandpa, with family who sees us." He nodded, content with that, and closed his eyes again. But in my mind, the memories kept unfolding. The day he wandered into the backyard in his pajamas, convinced it was time to plant tomatoes in midwinter. I'd guided him back inside, made hot cocoa the way he liked it, extra marshmallows, and we sat by the fire as he recounted tales of his teaching days. Students who'd gone on to build bridges or fix engines. My parents had started avoiding him by then, locking the guest room for his own good, but I'd pick the lock with a hairpin, a trick he'd taught me years ago for jam drawers. Their growing irritation turned to plans. I overheard whispers of assisted living, costs tallied like grocery lists. It hurt, watching them reduce him to a line item, while to me, he was still the man who'd taught me resilience, who said, "Life's not about being perfect, Nanny. It's about showing up." As the cab neared the bus station, the skyline giving way to flatter horizons, I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the contact I'd saved weeks earlier. June Harmon, Grandpa's younger sister, my great-aunt. She'd called me months back, voice warm over the line, expressing worry after hearing from a mutual cousin about his decline. "If things get bad, Elena, you ring me. Don't let them warehouse him away." Her words had stuck, a lifeline I hadn't known I'd need. Now, with the airport betrayal fresh, I dialed, heart racing. She answered quickly, her tone alert despite the early hour. "June, it's Elena. Grandpa needs you. We need you." There was a pause, then her voice broke with emotion. "Tell me where you are, child. I'll be ready." Relief washed over me as I bought 2 tickets at the station counter, the clerk eyeing our disheveled state but saying nothing. We boarded the bus, Grandpa dozing against my shoulder, the engine's hum a soothing promise of distance. As we rolled out, past fields awakening under the sun, I vowed silently I'd protect him from the fog, from the forgetting, as long as I could. The bus rumbled onward, cutting through the flat expanse of highway where cornfields stretched like golden oceans under the rising sun. Grandpa slept fitfully against my shoulder, his breathing shallow but steady, the framed photo of Grandma still clutched in his lap like a talisman. I stared out the window, watching telephone poles flick by in rhythmic blurs, my mind a whirlwind of what we'd left behind. The betrayal at the airport wasn't a sudden storm. It had been brewing for months, whispers in the shadows of our perfect home that I'd tried to ignore until they became screams. As the miles accumulated, separating us from Omaha, those memories resurfaced, sharp as shards of glass, reminding me how the cracks had formed long before we ever packed for that ill-fated trip. It started with subtle shifts after I returned from college for summer break. The house felt colder, not just in temperature, but in spirit. The guest room door locked more often, Mom's excuses about Grandpa needing undisturbed rest ringing hollow. I'd press my ear to the wood sometimes, hearing his muffled humming, a jazz tune from his youth, and I'd slip in when no one was looking, sitting beside him as he gazed out the window at nothing in particular. But the real warning came one afternoon, when I was supposed to be studying in the den. Dad's voice drifted from the kitchen, low and businesslike on the phone. "Yes, I know the lawyer mentioned she'll have to co-sign, but she's barely out of high school, well, college now, but still a kid. We'll manage it without her input." My heart skipped. Who was she? I waited until he hung up and left the room, then crept in, eyes darting to the counter where papers lay scattered. Medical directives, power of attorney forms, estate planning documents that listed assets being redirected, Grandpa's savings and property funneled into trusts under my parents' control. And there, in fine print, my name as a potential beneficiary, but with clauses that could exclude me if I interfered. They weren't just planning for his care. They were erasing us both from the equation, treating family like a balance sheet to be adjusted. That evening, the air at dinner was thick with unspoken tension. Grandpa sat at the end of the table, spooning soup slowly, his eyes distant as if lost in a different decade. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "He still recognizes me," I said, voice tighter than I intended, setting my fork down with a clink. "He smiles when I bring him cookies, laughs if I tell a joke wrong. He's not gone." Mom didn't meet my gaze, folding her napkin precisely. "Elena, you're letting emotions cloud your judgment. You've always been so sentimental about him." Dad leaned back, rubbing his temples. "This isn't about love holding everything together. It's about practicality. What's best in the long run?" "Best for whom?" I wanted to shout, but instead I pushed. "You mean convenient, like locking him away so he doesn't embarrass you at your galas." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Grandpa's soft tapping on his glass. From that night on, they shut me out completely. No more updates on doctor's visits, no discussions about his medications. It was as if I'd become invisible too, just like him. They accelerated the erasure after that. I came home one weekend to find his beloved books boxed up in the garage, his worn slippers in the trash, the tea kettle he'd used for decades replaced with a sleek electric one Mom deemed modern. "We're simplifying," she said brightly, as if decluttering a closet, not a life. But to me, it felt like they were rubbing him out, piece by piece, preparing the house and themselves for a future without his presence. Grandpa noticed in his own way. He'd wander the hallway sometimes, looking for familiar items, murmuring about things gone missing. I'd distract him with walks in the backyard, holding his arm as we shuffled under the maple tree, talking about birds or the way the leaves rustled like whispers. "They're changing everything," I confided once when his eyes seemed clearer. He patted my hand. "Change isn't always loss, Laney. Sometimes it's a door opening." But I knew better. This was closure, forced and final. Then came the dinner where it all crystallized. Dad cleared his throat midway through the meal, folding his hands like he was delivering a diagnosis. "We've decided on a family trip to South Africa. One last chance to make memories before before things progress further. His smile was polished, too even, eyes avoiding Grandpa's blank stare. Mom nodded enthusiastically, mentioning safaris and sunsets, but her enthusiasm felt scripted. I looked at Grandpa, his fingers drumming an invisible beat on the tablecloth, and leaned close. "Adventure sound good?" I whispered. He glanced up, a wink flickering in his clouded gaze, brief, but enough to hook me. Something in my core twisted. This wasn't about memories. It was a facade, a way to tie up loose ends. But I said yes, not because I believed their charade, but because instinct screamed to stay close, to be the safeguard if they faltered. As the bus now jostled over a rural road, nearing Holton, those doubts replayed like a bad recording. Had I seen the signs earlier, could I have stopped it? No, I realized. The betrayal was inevitable, rooted in their world of appearances over substance. But here, fleeing toward June's promise, I was rewriting the ending. The station appeared ahead, a modest brick building bathed in afternoon light, quiet after the airport's frenzy. June stood on the platform, denim jacket hugging her sturdy frame, silver hair tied back, holding a sign, William plus Elena, in shaky marker. She dropped it when she spotted us, rushing forward with open arms. "Oh, Billy," she gasped, tears welling as Grandpa blinked in recognition. "June bug," he murmured weakly, reaching for her. She laughed softly, hugging him tight, then turned to me. "You brave girl. Come on, let's get you home." Her truck waited nearby, engine purring softly, and as we drove down two-lane roads flanked by endless fields, the tension in my chest began to uncoil. This was no polished facade. It was real, worn, welcoming. June's house emerged at the end of a gravel drive, a modest two-bedroom cottage with chipping white paint and a wide porch that sagged slightly under the weight of potted ferns and weathered rocking chairs. It looked lived in, the kind of place where stories collected in the corners like dust motes, not scrubbed away for show. She helped Grandpa out of the truck, his legs wobbly from the long journey, and guided him inside with a gentle arm around his waist. "Easy now, Billy. We've got soup on the stove, your favorite, potato leek, just like Mama used to make." He murmured something unintelligible, but his shoulders relaxed at her touch, as if recognizing the timbre of family in her voice. I followed, carrying the photo frame he'd clung to, the air inside thick with the scent of simmering broth and fresh-baked bread. The living room was cozy, cluttered with knitted afghans and faded family pictures on the walls. Grandpa as a young man in overalls, Grandma laughing in a sundress. June settled him in an armchair by the window, tucking a blanket over his knees, and turned to me with a knowing smile. "You look like you could use a cup of tea. Sit, Elena. We've got time now." As I sank into the couch, exhaustion crashing over me like a wave, my mind drifted back to the airport. The ready, replaying the journey that had led us here. The quiet act of abandonment that still burned in my chest. It had started innocently enough, or so I'd told myself. The drive to the airport under a sky streaked with dawn's first light. The car smelled of leather seats and Mom's perfume, too floral and cloying in the confined space. Grandpa sat beside me in the back, his navy cardigan buttoned unevenly, sleeves dangling past his wrists, the photo of Grandma pressed against his chest like a shield. Dad kept glancing at his watch in the rearview mirror, muttering about traffic while Mom adjusted her makeup, lips pursed in concentration. I tried to ease the tension, whispering to Grandpa, "We're going somewhere warm, elephants and savannas. Remember how you told me animals never forget?" He turned to me, eyes foggy but flickering with a spark. "You'll make a fine teacher one day, Rose," he said softly, mistaking me again for his sister in his fear. I didn't correct him. Instead, I held his hand, feeling the tremor in his fingers, and hummed along to the faint melody he started, an old military march, perhaps, or a childhood lullaby. The closer we got to the terminal, the more my unease grew, a knot twisting in my stomach like I'd swallowed stones. The airport was a hive of activity, lines snaking under harsh lights, the din of announcements and luggage wheels echoing off the high ceilings. We unloaded at curbside check-in, Dad handling the bags with efficient precision, Mom smoothing her blouse as if preparing for a photo op. Grandpa shuffled along, clutching my wrist now, his steps hesitant on the slick tile floors. "It's loud," he whispered, flinching at a nearby cart's beep. I reassured him, "Just a little longer, then we'll be on our way." But Mom pulled me aside near the coffee stand, her voice clipped. Elena fetches something strong, black for your father, latte for me. I glanced back at Grandpa, protesting lightly. What about him? He might want. She cut me off with a wave. He's fine. We'll handle it. Dad steered him to that isolated row of seats by the frosted window, the tarmac outside dotted with planes like sleeping giants. Grandpa sat obediently, photo in lap, as Dad leaned down, enunciating slowly, "Just sit here. We'll go check in and come right back." The words landed like a promise, but Dad's eyes didn't meet his father's. Too busy scanning the crowd, avoiding the vulnerability staring back. I lingered at the coffee counter, steam rising from the cups in my hands, watching them walk away toward the security line, back straight, not a single glance over their shoulders. 5 minutes ticked by on the overhead clock. Then 10. Grandpa remained still, thumbs circling the photo frame, his expression patient, trusting. My pulse quickened. Something felt off, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong spot. 15 minutes. I set the coffees down on a nearby table, abandoned them, and approached the check-in desk, legs leaden. "The Foster party, have they checked in?" The attendant tapped keys, smiled politely. "Yes, all cleared, boarding in about 20 minutes. All of them." The words punched the air from my lungs. They'd boarded without him, left him like unclaimed baggage in a sea of strangers. He didn't know the gates from the exits, couldn't recall his own flight number, yet they'd walked away, calm and certain, as if shedding a burden. Panic surged, hot and urgent. I turned, weaving through the throng, my breath ragged. Betrayal wasn't fireworks, it was this, quiet footsteps receding while loyalty waited in vain. I broke into a run, dodging suitcases and strollers, the terminal's noise fading to white static. There he was, still in the chair, eyes darting hopefully at passing faces. "Grandpa," I gasped, kneeling, my hands on his knees. Recognition dawned slowly. "Rose, where's your father?" He said he'd come back. His voice cracked, small and scared. "It's okay," I soothed, fighting tears. "I'm here now. We don't need them." He confessed he'd been frightened, unsure what to do, and rage boiled in me. Not at him, but at the parents who'd once ridden on his shoulders, learned to fish from his patient hands, now discarding him for convenience. I helped him stand, wrapping my scarf around his neck. "We're going our own way." That's when Mom's voice pierced the air. "Elena!" She stood by the escalator, disheveled phone in hand, Dad looming silent behind. "What are you doing? Get back here!" I faced them, Grandpa's hand in mine. "You abandoned him, like he means nothing." Mom's face twisted. "He needs professionals, not your drama." Dad added, "Think of the scene you're causing." But I saw through it, their facade cracking. "He's your father," I said flatly. Silence hung, then I turned, leading Grandpa toward the exit, their pleas fading behind us. As June now poured tea in her kitchen, steam curling like memories, I shook off the recollection. "You did right by him," she said, handing me a mug. "That's what counts." I cupped the mug in my hands, the warmth seeping through the ceramic like a balm against the chill that had lingered since the airport. June sat across from me at the scarred wooden table, her eyes kind but searching, as if she could see the storm still raging inside me. Grandpa napped in the armchair, his soft snores a steady rhythm that grounded the room. "Tell me what happened, Elena," she said gently, stirring honey into her own tea. "From the beginning, if you can." I nodded, the words tumbling out haltingly at first, then faster. The announcement of the trip, the car ride at dawn, the airport's betrayal unfolding in slow motion. As I spoke, my mind replayed the escape, the moments after I turned my back on my parents, leading Grandpa out into the cold light where taxis idled like lifelines. We'd stepped through the automatic doors, the wind biting at our faces, carrying the acrid scent of exhaust and rain-damp asphalt. Grandpa shuffled beside me, confused but compliant, his hand trembling in mine. "Are we missing the plane?" he asked, voice muffled by the scarf I'd wrapped tighter around his neck. I hailed a cab with my free arm, the driver pulling up curbside, popping the trunk though we had no bags, just the photo frame and our coats. "Bus station," I said, voice steadier than I felt, helping Grandpa into the back seat. He settled against the worn vinyl, staring out at the receding terminal, and whispered, "They said they'd come back." My heart twisted. I slid in beside him, pulling the door shut with a thud that echoed my resolve. The cab lurched forward, weaving through airport traffic, and I watched in the side mirror as the building shrank, a monument to what we'd fled. Silence enveloped us, broken only by the driver's radio murmuring traffic updates. But in my head, accusations swirled. How could they? Dad, who Grandpa had taught to tie knots and bait hooks. Mom, who'd been tucked in with stories of his Alabama childhood. They'd reduced him to inconvenience, a chapter to close. The cab ride blurred into miles of highway, suburbs giving way to open roads where billboards advertised diners and motels. Grandpa dozed fitfully, head lolling against my shoulder, and I used the time to pull out my phone, fingers shaking as I scrolled to June's number. I'd saved it after her call a few months back, her voice crackling over the line with concern. Billy's not himself anymore, is he? If they push him aside, you let me know. I've got room here in Holton. Now, with betrayal fresh, I hit dial. She picked up on the second ring, her hello warm and alert. June, it's Elena. We left. They abandoned him at the airport. Can we come to you? There was a beat of silence, then her voice firm and fierce. Of course you can. Get to the bus station. I'll meet you at the Holton stop. How's he holding up? I glanced at Grandpa, his eyes closed, face peaceful in sleep. Tired, confused, but safe now. She promised to have everything ready, and as I hung up, a weight lifted, replaced by tentative hope. At the bus station, a squat building with vending machines humming in the corner, I bought tickets for the next departure south, using cash from my wallet, college savings I'd tucked away. The waiting area was sparse, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a few travelers scattered on benches. I helped Grandpa to a seat, wrapping him in my coat, his head resting on my shoulder as the minutes ticked by. He woke briefly, asking for water, and I fetched a bottle from a machine, watching him sip slowly, his hands steady for once. This adventure's different, he murmured, a hint of his old humor surfacing. I smiled, tears pricking. The best ones are. When the bus arrived, its brakes sighing like a weary traveler, we boarded last, finding seats near the back. The engine roared to life, pulling us into motion, past warehouses and onto the interstate where fields unfolded under a paling sky. Grandpa gazed out the window, pointing occasionally at a passing cow or silo, his comments fragmented but joyful. Look, Laney, that's like the farm back home. I nodded, holding his hand, the vibration of the road lulling us both. For hours, we rode through sleepy towns and rolling prairies, the landscape a blur of greens and golds, and for the first time freedom tasted real, not escape, but direction. Holton appeared as the sun dipped toward afternoon, the station a simple platform edged with wildflowers. June was there, sign in hand, her embrace swallowing Grandpa in denim and warmth. June Bug, he said, recognition blooming like a rare flower. She teased him about getting old, tears mingling with laughter, then bundled us into her truck. The drive to her house wound through quiet streets lined with oaks, the air sweet with mown grass. Now in her kitchen, as I finished recounting it all, June reached across the table, squeezing my arm. You saved him, Elena, and maybe yourself too. That first night, after soup and clean sheets, I sat on the porch while Grandpa slept inside. Stars pricked the sky, brighter than in Omaha, and June joined me with fresh mugs. You did the right thing, she said quietly. Even if they don't see it, stay as long as you need. This house has room for those who remember each other. I didn't cry. I just breathed, the relief washing over me like starlight, soft and healing. For once I wasn't bracing, I was arriving. Over the next few days, Holton's quiet rhythm wrapped around us like one of June's handmade quilts, pieced together from scraps, but strong enough to hold against the cold. Mornings started early, the sun filtering through lace curtains in the spare bedroom where I'd claimed a twin bed, its mattress sagging but comforting. I'd wake to the scent of coffee brewing and bacon sizzling. June already in the kitchen, humming an old hymn as she stirred oatmeal on the stove. Grandpa would be in his room, sometimes awake and staring at the ceiling, other times still lost in sleep's fog. I'd help him dress, buttoning his shirt with patient fingers, tying his shoes when his hands fumbled, then guide him to the table where we'd eat slowly. No rush, no expectations. Good morning, Billy, June would say brightly, setting a bowl before him. He'd nod, spoon dipping tentatively, and on better days he'd murmur, smells like home. Those words, simple as they were, became my anchor, proof that fragments of him lingered beneath the haze. Caregiving settled into a routine that felt less like duty and more like devotion. After breakfast, I'd take Grandpa for short walks around the block, his arm looped through mine, steps measured to match his shuffle. The neighborhood was peaceful, houses with picket fences and gardens bursting with late summer blooms, zinnias and sunflowers nodding in the breeze. We'd pause at the corner park, sitting on a bench where birds flitted between branches, and I'd point out a squirrel scampering or a cloud drifting lazily. "Remember the ducks at our park, Grandpa?" I'd ask, and sometimes he'd smile, eyes crinkling. "Quack, quack, Laney." Other times he'd call me Rose, weaving stories of his sister, picking blackberries in Alabama fields, the juice staining their fingers purple. I didn't mind the mix-ups. They were windows into his past, pieces I collected like treasures. Back home, June would handle lunch, simple sandwiches or soup, while I read to him from library books, Charlotte's Web again, his head tilting as if catching echoes of the words. Afternoons brought naps for him, and I'd help with chores, laundry folding in the sunlit backyard, grocery runs to the corner market where the clerk knew June by name and slipped extra cookies into the bag. As weeks blurred into a pattern, I felt a shift inside me, like roots taking hold in fertile soil. The pressure of Omaha's perfection had faded, replaced by purpose. One evening, after tucking Grandpa in, June sat with me on the porch, rocking chairs creaking softly. "You're good at this, Elena, caring without making it feel like pity." Her words sparked something. I'd always been the emotional one, too attached, as Mom said, but here it was a strength. The next day, I drove to the local community college, a brick building, nestled among maples, and enrolled in a part-time nursing assistant course. Classes started mid-morning twice a week, covering basics like vital signs and dementia care. The instructor, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Harlan, lectured with charts and videos, but it was the hands-on labs practicing bed baths on mannequins, learning to communicate with non-verbal patients, that resonated. "Empathy isn't weakness," she said once. "It's the tool that heals." I absorbed it all, scribbling notes in a worn notebook, applying lessons at home, adjusting Grandpa's pillows for comfort, monitoring his meds with a chart June and I made. Evenings became my time for reflection. After dinner, when Grandpa dozed by the radio playing soft jazz, I'd pull out a journal I'd bought at the college bookstore, leather-bound, pages crisp and inviting. I wrote without structure, just streams of moments. The way Grandpa's eyes lit up at lemon cookies, a half-told story about dropping his wedding ring in bread dough, June's cornbread recipe scribbled in the margins. It wasn't for grades or therapy. It was preservation, a way to hold on to him as the fog thickened. Some nights, his lucidity pierced through like sunlight. Once, as I helped him to bed, he gripped my hand. "You're doing good, Laney, real good." Kneeling, I whispered, "I wish I could do more." He shook his head. "You stayed, that's everything." Tears came then, quiet and cleansing. But the decline crept on, mornings when he forgot how to use a spoon, afternoons staring blankly, calling for Grandma in whispers. June and I shared the load, her stories of their childhood filling gaps, how Grandpa built tree houses for her, taught her to whistle. Community wove in too. I started a small reading circle at the local senior center, inspired by our evenings. Twice a week, I'd gather kids from the neighborhood and elders from the memory unit, reading aloud under fluorescent lights that hummed like old friends. The children giggled at animal tales, while residents' eyes softened, some tapping fingers to forgotten rhythms. One woman, Margie, mistook me for her daughter, recounting her 1952 wedding each time. I listened, never correcting, understanding now that memory lived in feelings, the flinch at loud noises, the smile at birdsong. Grandpa joined when he could, wheeled in on good days, humming along. It felt like inheritance, this caregiving, not sacrifice. By spring, as flowers bloomed outside June's window, our trio had forged a quiet bond. The Rememberers, June called us, laughing over tea. And in those moments, amid the routines and rare clarities, I built a life not of escape, but of deep, deliberate remembrance. Spring unfolded in Holton like a gentle promise. Wildflowers dotting the fields and birdsong filling the mornings with melody. I'd rise before dawn some days, slipping into the kitchen to brew coffee while June tended the garden. Her hands earth-stained from planting tomatoes, Grandpa's favorites, even if he couldn't name them anymore. Our routines had deepened, woven with threads of quiet joy. Helping him with breakfast, where I'd guide his spoon on foggy days, no impatience, just presence. Walks that grew shorter as his strength waned, but richer in pauses to watch butterflies dance on the breeze. My nursing classes progressed. Clinical rotations at the memory care unit, teaching me to see beyond words. The subtle cues of comfort in a patient's sigh, the dignity in holding a hand during confusion. Margie still called me her daughter, her wedding tales a ritual that grounded us both, and I'd bring Grandpa's old radio, jazz notes coaxing taps from toes long still. Journaling became ritual too, pages filling with snippets. The way he chuckled at a burnt muffin one morning, calling it just like your grandma's experiments, a lucid flash that warmed like sunlight. But the fog thickened inexorably. Mornings when he'd stare at his reflection in the mirror, puzzled, whispering, "Who's that old man?" June and I shared knowing glances, our care a tandem effort, bathing him with lavender soap to soothe, playing records of big band swings that sometimes pierced the haze. One afternoon, wheeling him into the backyard under the oak, he turned to me with unexpected clarity, eyes sharp as in our park days. "You're doing good, Laney," he said, voice steady. "Real good." I knelt, throat tight. I wish I could have done more, stopped them sooner. He shook his head slowly. "You did the one thing that mattered. You stayed." His words lingered like an echo, a benediction amid the decline. That night, I printed a photo from our bus station escape, him bundled in my scarf, smiling faintly at the sun, and placed it by my bed, a reminder that love endured in images, in choices. The morning he passed came softly, the house hushed under a veil of dawn light. I found him in his chair by the window, hands folded on the worn blanket, radio murmuring jazz in the background, Grandma's photo beside him. His face was peaceful, as if he'd simply paused mid-story, eyes closed in restful slumber. No struggle, no fear, just quiet departure. I sat beside him, holding his hand one last time, whispering, "You can rest now. I'll remember the rest for you." Tears came then, slow and silent, mingling with gratitude for the months we'd stolen from abandonment. June joined me, her arm around my shoulders, and we grieved together, not in wails, but in shared stories over tea. His pranks as a boy, the way he'd whistle while woodworking. We buried him under the oak in the backyard, his favorite spot where sunlight dappled the grass. The ceremony was intimate. June, a few neighbors who'd grown fond of his hummed tunes during our walks, and me. No elaborate service, no distant relatives, just those who'd seen him truly in his final chapter. I didn't invite my parents. It wasn't anger, but clarity. They'd forfeited their place by walking away. A week later, I drove back to Omaha, the highway stretching like a thread connecting past to present. The house looked smaller, its white shutters dulled, lawn impeccably trimmed but lifeless. I rang the doorbell, heart steady. Mom answered, eyes widening, shadows under them speaking of sleepless nights. "Elena." Dad stood behind, arms crossed but posture weary, not defiant. "We heard about your grandfather." I nodded. "He went peacefully, surrounded by love." Mom wrung her hands. "We didn't mean to," I cut in gently. "You did. You left him at the airport, and you'd have done the same to me if I strayed from your path." Dad stepped forward. He barely remembered most days. It wasn't personal. It was never about his memory, I said. It was about what I wouldn't forget. From my bag, I pulled the envelope June had given me, Grandpa's revised will, a quiet letter inside, his savings, pension, a note reading, "To Elena, you were the only one who stayed. My love belongs with you. Keep remembering, Grandpa." Their faces shifted. Shock, guilt, a flicker of regret, more complex than words. "I'm not here to fight," I added, "just to say I'm okay and he was too." As I turned, Mom grabbed my wrist. "Will you come home?" I met her gaze, seeing not malice but void, a life built on control, now echoing empty. I am home, in Holton, with those who remembered me without demands. Back in Kansas, I dove deeper into studies, patients at the center becoming like extended family, their stories threads in my tapestry. The reading circle grew, children and seniors blending voices in tales that bridged generations. I hung the bus photo beside my nursing certificate, a symbol of defiance turned destiny. Every night, under stars that seemed to listen, I whispered thanks. Not letting go, but holding on, because in choosing him, I'd chosen myself, and that would always be enough. As the seasons turned gently in Holton, the sharp edges of that airport day softened into distant echoes, wet like waves receding from a shore now calm. I found myself lingering more on the porch where Grandpa once sat, the rocking chair creaking under me, as evening light painted the fields in hues of amber and rose. June would join sometimes, her presence a quiet companion, sharing cups of chamomile tea that warmed from within, its steam curling lazily into the cooling air. The house, with its chipped paint and overflowing bookshelves, had become a sanctuary, each corner holding whispers of our time together. His favorite mug on the shelf, the journal pages filled with his half-stories preserved like pressed flowers. My days flowed with purpose now, nursing shifts at the center, where patients' eyes lit with recognition, not from names, but from the kindness in a touch, the patience in a listened tale. The reading circle blossomed, young voices mingling with elders in soft recitals, laughter bubbling over forgotten lines, healing in the shared rhythm of words. Grief visited still, in quiet moments when a jazz tune played on the radio or a photo caught the light just so, but it came as a gentle visitor, not a storm, reminding me of the love that outlasted loss. In choosing to stay, to remember, I'd uncovered a strength I hadn't known, a home built not on foundations of expectation, but on the soft soil of empathy and presence. And as stars emerged one by one in the velvet sky, I'd lean back, breathing deeply, and murmur to the night, "We did it, Grandpa. We found our way," the words fading into the breeze like a final tender whisper.